on it. So the breaking news from yesterday was that the WNBA has told the WNBPA and its teams that a term sheet for a new CBA ought to be completed by March 10th for the 2026 schedule not to be impacted. So that is 2 weeks from today, you guys. And this is essentially the drop dead date that Adam Silver was referring to when he
March 10th. That's the date circled in red on every WNBA calendar right now. 2 weeks from today, the league needs a handshake agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement, or the 2026 season is in serious jeopardy. And what makes this deadline so critical is what still needs to happen after that date: 3 separate drafts, over 100 free agents, contracts that need lawyers to review and finalize. We're talking about a process that normally takes months, compressed into weeks. But here's what nobody's talking about. The timing of this announcement wasn't random. The league dropped this deadline exactly 1 day after revealing something that's never happened in WNBA history.
Over 100 players who are free agents. So it's a lot of things that need to be done. There's also a lot of housekeeping things. And I will say, you guys, this March 10th date is just for them to get a handshake agreement, because Adam Silver also alluded to this weeks ago. He's like, even if we have a handshake agreement, things still have to go through lawyers. It has to be put on paper. And that sometimes takes at minimum a week. Most of the time, it takes multiple weeks to even get a contract on paper. And from my understanding, they can't do any of these drafts or like logistical things, or players can't start signing officially with teams until they have inked pen to paper this brand new CBA.
$50,000. That's what each player is getting as a bonus, because the WNBA triggered its revenue sharing clause for the first time ever. $8 million total split among 13 teams. And the league made sure everyone knew about it the day before they announced that drop-dead date. This is strategic positioning at its finest. The message is crystal clear. Look at the momentum we have. Look at the money that's already flowing to players under the current structure. Don't kill this golden goose by holding out for demands we can't meet. Because here's the reality. That number represents. The 2025 season generated enough revenue to hit a benchmark that's existed in the CBA for years, but never been reached. And that happened in a year when Caitlin Clark, the biggest draw in the league, missed significant time with an ankle injury.
So March 10th is the day, you guys. Now, a lot of fans thought that the timing of this announcement was very interesting, because 1 day prior to this, the news was shared that for the first time in history, the WNBA generated enough revenue in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing with its players, union leadership told ESPN on Sunday. So union leaders said that the league notified player leadership earlier this month that they hit the benchmark. The 13 teams will receive a total of $8 million from the league to disperse among players. And $8 million, if you do the math, that's about $50K per player, which is a pretty sweet bonus for these players.
Think about what 2026 could look like. You've got a healthy Caitlin Clark playing a full season. You've got not one but 2 new expansion teams in Toronto and Portland, both of which have already sold out their season tickets. The Golden State Valkyries exceeded every expectation in their inaugural season, selling out every home game and moving merchandise at levels that shocked even the optimists. Now multiply that by 2 more teams. A'ja Wilson is coming off another MVP season and a championship. Paige Bueckers is entering the league. The Caitlin Clark effect has elevated interest in players across the entire league. The ratings trajectory, the attendance numbers, the merchandise sales, everything is pointing up. And the league is essentially saying, we just proved we can hit revenue sharing in a down year. Imagine what happens when everything breaks right. But there's a fundamental problem. The 2 sides aren't even negotiating in the same framework.
Well, to get some of this revenue sharing, like you just made $50K that none of you guys were expecting. Do not halt this momentum. We need to get a deal done. Like, I feel like all of this is super, super calculated on the WNBA's part. And I think it's also a way for them to show like, hey, even if we don't give you gross revenue, you're going to get paid. There is a lot of money to be made. Again, the WNBA is offering a net revenue sharing model, and the players are going for a gross revenue sharing model. The difference between the two, net revenue is essentially the players getting paid after the WNBA takes in the revenue and pays their expenses. And then the gross sharing model is the players get paid of basically all of the revenue that is coming in. So
gross revenue versus net revenue. That's the entire negotiation in 6 words. The players want a percentage of every dollar that comes into the league before expenses are paid. The league is offering a percentage of what's left after they cover costs. And neither side is budging. The players initially asked for a salary cap over $9 million per team. The league countered at $5.6 million. That's a $3.5 million gap per team, multiplied by 15 teams once the expansion franchises join. We're talking about over $50 million in additional salary obligations, and that's before you factor in the gross revenue sharing model the players are demanding. The league's position is that the players' proposal would create hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. Adam Silver has said repeatedly, stop thinking about this as revenue sharing. Think about it as getting salaries as high as possible. He's trying to reframe the entire conversation, but the Players Association isn't buying it.
And try to get a deal done. I think there is a snowstorm happening on the East Coast. Shout out to you guys. I hope that you guys are okay. It is currently nearly 80 degrees here in Texas. Kind of loving this weather, not to rub it in. Anyway, the two sides did swap proposals last week. And if you remember, the Players Association submitted a proposal back in 2025. And it took the WNBA weeks in order to come back with any sort of counter proposal. And I also think that that was strategic on the side of the WNBA. Now, I do also think that on the league side, they have always said that they're not tapping into this gross revenue share model. And Adam Silver has also said that. He has said it many times. He's like, we shouldn't think about it as revenue sharing. We should think.
Here's where it gets complicated. The two sides did exchange proposals last week. They had a virtual bargaining session that included over 50 players, union leadership, league staff, and members of the Labor Relations Committee. That's a positive sign. They're still talking, but look at what's actually happening in these exchanges. The players came down from their initial gross revenue percentage, but they're still hovering around 27%. The league hasn't moved at all on the revenue sharing structure. Instead, they're making concessions on other issues. They offered to provide housing for all players, at least for the first few years of the deal. That's significant. That addresses a real quality of life issue that players have raised for years. But it's not what the players are asking for. The union keeps submitting proposals with gross revenue sharing. The league keeps saying that's off the table. Here's what we can do instead. At some point, somebody has to blink. And we're now 2 weeks away from finding out who that's going to be.
Saying, we're never doing that, so stop giving us proposals that even have that in it. We're not budging on that, and they are budging on other things. And so I don't really, I think it's going to be either side calling each other's bluff, or one side completely conceding on everything that they have been standing on for the entirety of these negotiations, and we just don't know. So the league is not budging off its offer of $5.6 million per team. So that's the salary cap that the league is offering. The players had sought a salary cap of more than $9 million and a greater share of league revenues.
The expansion teams are the hidden casualties in all of this. Think about what Toronto and Portland are dealing with right now. They've sold season tickets, they've hired coaching staffs, they've built out their front offices, they've invested millions of dollars into facilities and infrastructure, and they have no idea who's going to be on their rosters. The Golden State Valkyries had their protected players locked in by December of last year. They spent months building relationships, planning their system, creating an identity. Their fans had time to get invested in the roster before the season started. That's how you launch a successful franchise. Toronto and Portland won't have that luxury. If a deal gets done on March 10th, they'll have maybe a few weeks to conduct expansion drafts, navigate free agency, and try to build some chemistry before the season starts. That's assuming the season starts on time, which at this point feels optimistic.
To that kickoff date, and these expansion teams are just at a disservice when it comes to that. And so that's pretty much the update, you guys. I don't necessarily want to see another year of 1 year free agents. I would love for some of these franchise players on these teams to start getting locked in, and you start getting, these core players at these franchises, and we truly start to build rivalries, build identities on these teams. And with the new CBA, that should be something where some of these players are like, okay, there's max contract players now. I want to be a max contract player. I want to stay with the Indiana Fever. I want to stay with the New York Liberty. I want to be that franchise player for the Toronto Tempo. I don't like the fact that all of this is going to be rushed. However, I think all of it being rushed is.
And then there's the free agency chaos that's coming. Annie Costabile has reported that many players are already planning to sign 1-year deals because of how rushed this process is going to be. That's a disaster for the league's long-term health. The WNBA needs franchise players locked into multi-year deals. It needs rivalries that build over seasons. It needs fans to invest emotionally in core rosters that stay together. You can't build that when everyone's on 1-year contracts because they didn't have time to properly evaluate their options. Think about what the league is trying to accomplish with expansion. They're trying to grow into new markets, build new fan bases, create new revenue streams. But you can't do that effectively when the rosters are going to turn over completely after one season, because nobody had time to make informed long-term decisions. The foundation you're trying to build is made of sand. Here's what makes this situation so frustrating. Both sides have legitimate points. The players are right that the league is experiencing unprecedented growth and they should benefit from that. The $50,000 bonus proves there's money flowing in. The ratings are up, attendance is up, merchandise sales are up. This isn't a failing business anymore. But the league is also right that the financial structure is complicated. The WNBA is 42% owned by the NBA, 40% owned by NBA teams, and 18% owned by outside investors. That ownership structure creates constraints that don't exist in other leagues, and while revenue is growing, profitability is a different question. You can have record revenue and still lose money if your expenses are growing faster. The net revenue model the league is offering does protect players from downside risk. If the league has a bad year, if a new TV deal falls through, if expansion doesn't generate the returns everyone expects, the players aren't on the hook for those losses. They get paid based on what's left after the league covers its obligations. That's not nothing. But the players look at leagues like the NBA and see a 50-50 split of basketball-related income. They see male athletes getting gross revenue sharing, and they're asking why the same model can't work in the WNBA. And the league's answer, essentially, is that the business isn't mature enough yet to support that structure. Which brings us back to that $50,000 bonus. The league is trying to prove that their model works. They're saying, look, we hit the revenue sharing trigger in a year, when our biggest star was injured. Imagine what happens when everything goes right. Trust the process, sign the deal, let's keep this momentum going. And there's logic to that argument. But the players are looking at the same numbers and drawing a different conclusion. They're saying, if you hit revenue sharing in a down year, that proves there's more money available than you're admitting. If you can afford to pay us $50,000 bonuses on top of our salaries, you can afford to give us a bigger piece of the pie. Show us the books, give us gross revenue sharing, let us participate fully in the growth we're driving. And that's where we're stuck. The league won't open up gross revenue sharing. The players won't accept net revenue as the framework. And we're 2 weeks away from a deadline that could shut down the season. Mark Cuban weighed in on this last week with a long post about how the WNBA's structure might be fundamentally broken. He suggested the league needs to think more like college sports, where players can supplement their salaries through NIL deals with sponsors and donors. His argument is that the ownership structure creates a ceiling that can't be broken through traditional collective bargaining. There's something to that. If the league is constrained by its relationship with the NBA and the way ownership is distributed, maybe the solution isn't to fight over revenue sharing percentages. Maybe it's to create additional revenue streams that flow directly to players outside the CBA framework. Let players sign endorsement deals, appearance fees, content creation partnerships. Build a model where the salary cap is just the baseline, and players can earn significantly more through their personal brands. But that's a long-term restructuring conversation. And right now we need a short-term solution to get the 2026 season started, which means somebody has to compromise. The most likely scenario is that the players come down on the gross revenue demand and the league comes up on the salary cap number. Maybe they meet somewhere around $7 million per team with enhanced net revenue sharing that's more favorable than what the league initially offered. Maybe the league agrees to more transparent financial reporting so players can see the books even if they don't get gross revenue sharing. Maybe there's a mechanism where the revenue sharing percentage increases if certain benchmarks are hit. But we're running out of time for creative solutions. March 10th is 2 weeks away. After that, even if they shake hands on a framework, it takes time to get lawyers involved and put everything on paper. Adam Silver acknowledged this weeks ago. He said even with a handshake deal, you're looking at a minimum of a week to formalize everything, sometimes multiple weeks. And the league has been clear that they can't conduct the expansion drafts or the WNBA draft or allow free agents to officially sign until there's an inked contract. Not a handshake agreement, an actual signed CBA. So even if March 10th produces a breakthrough, we're still looking at late March or early April before rosters can start taking shape. The season is supposed to start in May. This is going to be rushed, no matter what happens. The question is whether it's going to be chaotically rushed or just uncomfortably rushed. And the worst-case scenario, the one nobody wants to talk about publicly, but everyone's thinking about privately, is that March 10th comes and goes without an agreement, and we're looking at a lockout or a strike. The players don't have games to strike from in March. But the symbolic impact of a work stoppage would be devastating. All that momentum the league just proved it has with that revenue-sharing announcement, gone. The hype around the expansion teams, deflated. The casual fans who just started paying attention because of Caitlin Clark, they'll move on to something else. You can't get that momentum back once you lose it. The WNBA spent decades trying to break through to mainstream relevance. They finally did it in 2024 and 2025. And now they're risking all of that progress because two sides can't agree on how to split the profits from that success. So what happens next? We wait, we watch, we hope that both sides understand what's at stake and find a way to compromise before March 10th. Because if they don't, the 2026 season isn't just going to be delayed, it might not happen at all, and that would be a tragedy for everyone involved. Players, owners, fans, and the sport itself. The WNBA has never been in a stronger position, and it's never been closer to self-destructing. 2 weeks to figure out which direction this goes. Let me know in the comments what you think happens. Does somebody blink before March 10th? Or are we headed for a work stoppage? And if you were negotiating this deal, what would your compromise look like? Because right now, I honestly don't see a path forward that makes both sides happy.